Hearts, Wounded Churches. We discuss a range of topics that include addictions, religious abuse, and recovery. This live platform offers meaningful questions and answers, a counseling continuum, and valuable feedback from professionals and others who have been through the process and are healed, forgiven, and reconciled. If they can achieve this, so can you. This program can be heard on iHeart, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, and others. Make no mistake, this podcast sustains and implements three things: healing, forgiveness, and reconciliation within the Church of God. Thanks for listening.
Good day, friends. Good to see you tonight for the podcast, Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches. We discuss different topics on this podcast that include addictions, religious issues, abuse and recovery. This live platform offers meaningful question and answers during the broadcast. And we have a counseling continuum that we're proud of, and we're just glad to have you here on this evening, friends. You know, God has blessed us with a good staff personnel here that works with us. We have our director and founder, Tennille McLeod. She's a mom, a wife. She homeschools, and she's also the founder of Arise magazine. She's in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And of course, Stella Cabin, she's a mother of 8. She's 90 plus years old. In fact, her father was a minister, a son was a pastor, and 2 nephews, minister and a pastor. She knows about the Church of God. And of course, she contributes quite often to this podcast. And of course, we always want to mention Ken Probes. He was a pilot there in Alaska. I worked in Alaska for about, not long, a short-term mission, about 9 days, but he was south of us, but he was there about 25 years. He's a pilot. And of course, he passed away some months ago, but we sure do miss his input on this podcast, Wounded Hearts. Friends, of the views that we discuss, do we agree always? No, we don't. But it's necessary to discuss these things to try to come to some added unity and forgiveness within God's church. So be advised, some of the content is sensitive and will elicit listener discretion. But with all sincerity of heart, friends, make no mistake, our only focus here is to implement a couple of things. Number 1, healing. Number 2, forgiveness. And of course, number 3, reconciliation within God's church. So join us and be ministers of reconciliation. We've begun this about 2 years ago because, friends, podcasts just exploded around the world. Can you imagine 400 million people listen to podcasts? 400 million. It's astounding. In fact, every 7 days, 30 million listen to podcasts each 7 days. But this podcast can be heard on many different platforms: Podbean, Podium, Soundwise, Mumbler, Gesso, Hubhopper, Buzzsprout, Amazon, Google, Poddash, Amazon Music, Pandora and Review, Apple, Face, SoundCloud, Alexa, Truth Social, and of course, YouTube and Facebook. So our director expanded those areas for us. We thank her for that. So you're able to archive other podcasts for the past 2 years by subject, and they're there free for you to download or whatever you need to do. The next few broadcasts, I want to talk about those who've returned, those who come back to the church, those who've come back again to seek the Lord, regardless of the different things that was holding them back. And of course, I'm still shocked at Jim Daly's book about the church and how 40 million people have stopped going to church. 10 million of those have stopped because of church issues and hurt feelings. Can you imagine? 40 million people stopped coming to church. Friends, if you know someone who's stopped coming to church, who's not saved, have them tune in. We want to encourage people to come back to the church. And we want to talk to those who have done that to give some support in that most important area. So again, that's why we're here, for reconciliation, healing, and forgiveness. Tonight, friends, a special guest, Mr. Ronald Carter. He's program coordinator at an exciting program called Next Step. I know the director there quite well, and it's an excellent place. And so we're going to talk to Ron about his return to Christ and what he had to go through. Let's give Ron a hand for being here tonight.
All right,
Wonderful,
All right.
wonderful.
Well, Ron, we're glad you're here, my friend, and you're coming
all right.
to share with us about these things. And so, Ron, you've come back to Christ about a little less than a year ago. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct, Brother Moon. Absolutely.
Ron, what was the biggest obstacle that was facing you trying to come back to Christ? What was the biggest obstacle you had? You've been around the church before, you know people, but what was the biggest obstacle that stopped you from coming back to church?
Well, my addiction, of course, you know,
Okay.
being enslaved, just and bound with it and not being able to I realized that I wasn't letting it go. I wasn't truly there. Um, I I remember being in a church and there was a song, "Have You Counted the Cost?" You know, and when I came to Christ, matter of fact, I came to Christ February 4th, 1994, in a small office in Macon at the Salvation Army. And you guys may know this man that led me to Christ. His name was Prince E. Moon.
Oh,
And
oh,
yeah,
that old
yeah,
guy, gray hair.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
him.
Oh, the
That's
old
him.
man, the old man. Yeah, old guy. Yeah.
That was over 30 years ago.
Wow,
30 years.
Yeah,
wow,
30
wow.
years ago. I mean, and you asked me the question, the biggest obstacle. Well, the enemy, which is known as the father of lies, created the thought of shame to
Mm,
just plague my mind after I had left.
mm,
Mm.
Not to mention, after seeing a certain sister who told me about the episode that happened in another congregation, and that right there intrigued me. I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way that the Church of God is considering to be divided. And I knew what I felt that day when you led me to the Lord. I knew I had never felt like that before. And I also knew that forgiveness is a key factor in salvation. So I said to myself, well, why didn't they just forget that individual? Because they've forgiven me for leaving and abandoning the church. And I don't know. So I had to come back. Like the prodigal son, I had to come back to see what I was missing. And I knew that the church hadn't changed. People are
yeah.
going to gossip and they're going to whisper. And they're going to say this and say that. But I never thought that it would go that far. Really did. But I'm
And I do
glad I'm
apologize.
coming back.
I'm sorry. I apologize, friend, but if you want to chime in, this is not a live podcast tonight, but we still want to hear from you. You can text in 1-866-538-3664. You can text in and we'll answer those texts. 1-866-538-3664. You can also call in that counseling line, Wounded Hearts. That number is 478-283-9093. Again, that number for counseling, 478-283-9093. You can also email us at Wounded Hearts. That email address is reeeechone at AOL.com. Again, if you want to email us, feel free. reeeechone at AOL.com. So you did hear some stuff about the church. You heard rumors, but you didn't let that stop you. Why was that?
Because I knew once I tasted the truth, I knew I had to get back to it. I couldn't do it on my own. I just absolutely refused to believe that that little episode meant the whole concept of the Church of God was false. There's no way. There's no way. So I, as being a hard headed individual, had to come back to see and find out. And I'm glad I did.
The things you heard, was it about the preacher per se who was in Macon, or was it about we don't want to mention names, but did you hear stuff about the preacher was in sin or the preacher had fallen and things like that?
Oh, no, 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 no. Nothing about making at all. It was about a certain individual in another congregation.
Okay.
That
Okay.
was the big buzz. It wasn't nothing about our little church in Macon. No,
So you didn't let those obstacles get in your way then.
not at all. Not at all.
All right, Ron, there's people who've heard things, and people do talk, don't they? People do talk. What
Absolutely.
would be your advice about people that have heard things about this or that and they're sitting home not coming to church? What is your advice to them?
My advice is to tap into your personal experience that you've
Okay.
received in the past.
Okay.
That's my advice.
Good
Because,
advice.
like I said, I have never felt the way I felt when you introduced me to Jesus Christ that day. And I never felt the way I felt being around the saints. Never. I mean, I desired to be around the saints. I was always there trying to come from fellowship meeting to fellowship meeting. I met some real good brothers, and I mean, it was genuine. So, I mean, tap into those feelings before you allow rumors, accusations to deter you from coming to the church of God. You've got to just fall back and just meditate and pray. Just ask God to relive, to allow you to revive those feelings within inside you. You have to.
Did the devil try to stop you from coming back at all? Did he try to hinder you from coming back?
Yeah, he tried. He tried, but I knew where my help was. I knew. I mean, when you're in addiction, you can't go too much further. I mean, you're already down. You're as low as a rug. You can't go any further. But I know hope is in the Church of God. I've it's been instilled in me that hope is found in the church. I know that.
And I'll
So
commend your.
either
Go
Sorry.
ahead. I'm
Go ahead,
sorry.
Director.
I didn't want to.
either I could just continue to lay down in the muck and mire and just be considered whatever they labeled me as when I was in my addiction, or I can just believe what God says I am, believe who Christ gave his life for. So I must be valued. I have to, and I have to consider that in my own life, what Christ thinks of me. I can't even be concerned about what I think of. I got to be concerned about what Christ thinks.
Right, Director, was there some comments?
Yes, sir. I did have a question. I commend your honesty. Do you think that that played a major role in your decision process, in your making the decision to return? Your honesty.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Because you can't fake it. You can't fake it. You can try to fake it, try to just you know blend in, but no, no, no. It never works. Never works. I would rather not be in the church than to be in the church and fake it. Because I'm playing with God, and
That's right.
God is the creator and of my life. You know, He can do whatever He chooses to do with me. So I'm not going to come amongst the saints and pretend that I'm saved, sanctified. I mean, because they're gonna see through it. It's called discernment. They're gonna see through it.
Hmm.
So no, I mean, I enjoy visiting our little humble church each and every Sunday. I enjoy it. I look forward to it.
Amen.
I'm
Friends,
glad I come.
we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're talking about returning to the church. If you've been out there for a while, maybe you've been wounded by what happened, this or that. Here's someone who's returned. They've gotten past what he said, she said. They got the facts for themselves. They did the homework, and now they're back. And if he did it, you can do it too because God loves you. We're going to take a quick break and we'll come right back with more discussion on returning to the church, the children of returning home. We'll be right back.
Greetings. Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches is a weekly podcast reaching out to the disenfranchised, disconnected, or wounded. Remember, you are not forgotten. You went through a debilitating situation. As a result, we are reaching out to you in love with forgiveness, reconciliation, and healing. We also offer an exciting magazine called Arise. It's an excellent fit for class discussions or personal devotions. Arise can be purchased through our website or by calling 478-784-7600. This podcast was designed by Church of God for Church of God. Don't go away. Stay tuned for more exciting conversations. Thanks for listening.
We're back with you, friends, tonight for our discussion with Ron Carter, Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches. We're talking about those who've been hurt and the steps that he took to return, to come back to the fold. Ron, somebody might be afraid of how they might be treated if they come back, how people will look at them. Any advice to that person?
Well, I too felt that. I was afraid of that as well. I was afraid that people would be whispering and pointing fingers and, oh, here he goes again, but I had to overlook that because see, I'm at church to worship the Lord. I'm at church to cultivate my relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not there to prove a point to anyone. I'm there to just allow God to create in me the intentions and the purpose that he has for me. That's why I'm there. I'm there to learn what my purpose is. I'm there to cultivate the relationship between me and Jesus Christ because I've tried it my way for many years. And it's by his grace that I'm not somewhere serving life in prison or even worse, dead on my way to a hell. So it's by his grace that I'm not, and I'm not going to continue to keep playing with that. So I'm not concerned about what people have to say, but they show love, open arms, and I haven't experienced what the enemy thought had in my mind that I thought.
Interesting.
So do away with that.
So I wanted to, for my director, any questions or comments from you?
No, not at the moment. No, sir.
I want to talk a little bit more about that. So if you think someone's looking or whispering, just overlook that and just keep on going, right? Is that what you're saying?
You have to. You have to. First of all, you have to make up your mind. What's your priority? Why are you coming back to the church? Are you coming back to the church to please the saints? Coming back to the church to try to prove a point? No, you're coming back to the church because we are supposed to congregate. We are supposed to assemble. I'm a saint. I'm supposed to be around saints.
Good.
That's
Good advice.
it.
Very good.
That's
Very good.
That's it.
That's the bottom line.
yeah.
I mean, he's not the author of confusion. I mean, it's not rocket science. I'm a saint. I'm supposed to be around the saint. So that's why I go to church. Be around the
Very
saint.
good. Very good.
Very good, man. I appreciate that. Laughter's good medicine. I needed a medicine ball today, and I got one. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ron, do you think pride can stop people coming back? Can pride stop them coming back to church, do you think?
Yeah, but we also know in Proverbs what God thinks about pride. Uh, and
Before destruction,
deadly.
hardly before a fall? Yeah.
Yeah, it's deadly. That's one of the 7 things that God hates, not detests, but hates. And I don't want to be guilty of doing something that God hates. I mean, I know he don't look upon sin, and we live a sin-free life, but pride is something that God hates. So I cannot allow pride to interrupt my walk, my desire, or my need to be with the saints and to be in Christ. I can't allow that to happen to me.
And I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you differentiate pride versus wounded? How can you tell the difference between the two? Anybody can answer,
Well,
I guess.
Good question. Yeah.
The thing is that, Sister Tanil, I don't recall these. I never allowed anything that was said about the Church of God to affect personally.
That's good.
I still feel about the saints as I felt back in '94 when I first went to my first fellowship. I can't recall being wounded. I guess I never took it to that level. I was amazed and surprised, but wounded, I could never say that. My pride kicked in when I thought that maybe they were tired of seeing me come in and out of the church. That right there affected me. And then there was times when I needed that good counseling, and I took it upon myself to try to fix my pride. But that part of that pride, and like I can fix it. Well, I didn't create me, so I learned I can't fix me either. So I mean, that's the part of pride that I've encountered. Wounded,
Okay.
and
Is there a follow up to that? A comment?
No,
Any
sir.
follow ups for our
No,
director?
sir. No follow up.
Well, Ron, that's good. The we don't mention names, of course, but just
right,
the issues we're talking about. The person that told you those things, you found them out not to be true. Yes? No.
yes, because the person. Thanks for mentioning that. The person that told me those things, when I returned shortly after, that person had returned too.
Wow.
And
Okay. So, and so, what did you think at that point when you saw that person there? Bless them, bless their hearts. When you saw them, who were kind of tearing the church down in a way, but
yeah,
yet you saw them back. Were they tearing it down in a way? I don't want to put words in, but were they kind of tearing it down in a way?
yeah, of course. Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah, yeah.
so saints, listen, what we're saying here. Now we're talking about returning to church. So there was a person who went to an unsaved person and said, "Look, da 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 da," and when he came back, he saw them there. Ron, what was your thoughts when you saw them, brother Ron?
When I seen her, oh, yeah,
Them, it, her, it,
when I,
them. Okay, no
I
names.
was like, poor thing, must have been misled. Had to be,
Okay.
had to be. With that person's experience in the church and longevity of the church, I was surprised that they were even allowed gossip for them, allow gossip to cause them to not come to church. I mean, after all those years, after all those testimonies, after all those prayers, then this little one issue of gossip. I mean, that person stopped traffic to tell me to run down the church.
Oh,
Stopped
wow.
traffic. I was on my way to the grocery store. They stopped in the middle of traffic, called
Wow.
me over there to the vehicle to tell me what was going on at the church. And I couldn't, okay, really, and I'm heading this way. But, I didn't like, say, no, tell me more. No, I was offended, to be honest with you. I was like, I looked at that person eye to eye and I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I said, but I don't believe, yeah, yeah, uh-huh. I said, no, no, that can't be true. That can't be true. And I ain't been to church in a couple of years, and I knew that. Man, I was in the midst of sin, and I knew that had to be false. I knew it.
Friends, our time is gone again tonight. Any questions or comments from our director?
No, sir. Not at the moment.
Ron, we need to have you back. I want to talk more about that. And there, when we're not throwing stones at them, we're just trying to find out about recovery, how people can hear some things and yet come back in a healthy way. Because again, our main focus here, whether you're in any part of we have the same issues going on in East Africa. They text us every week about issues that are going on. So it's a worldwide thing. And again, Mr. Davis, 40 million people staying home from church. So we're discussing how to reconnect with love, with forgiveness, and healing in God's church. So join us and be ministers of reconciliation. Brother Carter, I'm going to have you come back next week, please, to continue this about what you went through, which is quite astounding. Thank you, my friend, to our director. Thank you, and those who listen in tonight. So don't forget, contact us with any input you might have. May the Lord bless you. Have a good evening.
Good night.